Welcome to session 5 in my All About Bees Queen Rearing and Selection video series. In this session, the final one, I'll be covering in detail the use of Apideas mini mating hives, and I will show you the system I used for many years of rearing queens in a Queenright colony. This is a more complex system than the Miller method and involves grafting larvae from a breeder colony to a frame that is then placed into a strong cell raiser colony. The beauty of this system is that it allows you to raise as many queens as you want to. I used to raise about 100 queens using this method, and I used lots of Apideas to get the queens mated. If you are enjoying these videos, please click the like and subscribe button below and you won't miss out on any new video releases. You can support my channel by buying me a beer or donating to my PayPal page. The links are in the sunflower banner at the top of the page. Mini nucs are used for queen mating and they are great fun. My favourite is the Apideas, which you can buy for about £35, but there are more and more different types coming onto the market at all times, and many of these are cheaper. They are populated with a cupful of bees, a ripe queen cell and some fondant in the end compartment. Mating is usually rapid in these mini colonies, and you can keep them going all summer by removing and adding queens and queen cells as you go along. These mini nucs allow the beekeeper to get a series of queens mated using a small number of bees without depleting the workforce of the colony providing them. I could get about 3 queens mated in a year in each Apideas in the shorter summers in the north of Scotland, but you could probably do more in the southern parts of the UK. They are for getting queens mated only, and although you may want to have a play and try and overwinter them, I never managed to do this in Scotland. As soon as the queen is mated and laying well, evidenced by 2 frames of sealed worker brood, she should be removed from the nuc as there is a strong risk of her and the bees absconding. I've observed this happening on several occasions and it is weird. The bees and the queen simply leave the brood behind and disappear into the sky. Not like a swarm, and I never could find if they'd settled anywhere. One advantage of using mini mating hives is that they can be strapped together and easily moved to mating stations, and queens seem to mate and commence laying earlier. My record in Scotland was 7 days. Once the mated queen has been removed, another queen cell or a virgin can then be introduced to the nuc. So please remember, they are for getting queens mated. You stock them with about 300 young bees, which is about 2/3 of a 1 pound honey jar. Add a ripe queen cell and fondant and you're ready to go. Let's have a closer look at the kit. It will arrive like this, and you have to assemble the frames and fit the excluders, etc. The larger compartment is the brood chamber, and next to that is a movable compartment for food. So separate the bits of plastic and assemble the frames by clicking them together, ensuring that the grooves for the wax foundation is on the inside. I would always fit a 1-inch strip of foundation like this to the frames, using molten beeswax to fix it to the frame, and the bees will draw it out no problem. Here you can see that there is a queen excluder fitted in the slot between the brood chamber and the feeder, as you don't want the queen laying in there. The transparent ground board has a flap which should be over the hole between the 2 of the frames, and this is where the queen cell is inserted, and a ventilation grill is placed at the front of the nuc, again in the slot provided. This is a photograph of the Apideas from the front, showing the open entrance on the right. This can be closed by sliding the panel down. This little queen excluder is very important, so don't throw them away like I did when I first started using them. You can leave the entrance open by sliding the excluder away from the entrance, but once the queen is mated and laying, you want to close the excluder so the queen can't abscond with the bees, but don't hang about and make every effort to remove her as soon as you can. You can see here that the front panel slides down to close the entrance and expose the ventilation grill. This photo shows the Apideas upside down with the sliding floor. You can put syrup in the feeder, but it is far easier to use fondant, which also lasts longer and can be housed in a cut comb container for easy replacement when empty. Here you can see the 8-ounce cut comb container in place. When the fondant has been consumed, you simply remove the empty cut comb container and add a new one full of fondant. Make sure that the queen doesn't get into the feed compartment when doing this, as you don't want to lay it in there. You can also buy additional parts to expand Apideas. For example, you can remove the feeder, add 2 additional frames into the brood chamber, and then add a top feeder, as you can see in this photograph. You can also buy supers, which act as second brood chambers, but to be honest, these are just fun additions that you might want to play with. Remember that they are really just for getting queens mated, when she is laying, I'll stress again, she should be removed. What I want to do next is show you the system of queen rearing in a Queenright colony that I learned from the National Bee Unit, in particular Mike Brown. If you would like a detailed document on this method, please leave a comment below and I can arrange to email it to you. I used to start this off in the middle of May in Scotland using large double brood box colonies that had come through winter well. I would select 2 or 3 hives, each having the equivalent of at least 20 full deep combs of bees, 8 to 12 combs of healthy brood of all stages, and the equivalent of 2 or 3 full combs of pollen. These are the cell raiser colonies. I would have previously selected a few breeder colonies with selected criteria of calmness on the comb, a fecund queen, and productivity. And these hives would be in the same apiary. This system involves grafting, which means transferring 1-day-old larvae from the breeder colony into special cups which are attached to a graft frame. Here you can see 4 grafting frames with the queen cups attached. 8 to 24 hours before the first grafting, the rearer colony is rearranged so most of the sealed brood is above a queen excluder and the queen and most of the unsealed brood are below the queen excluder, as shown in the diagram. At the same time, the graft frame containing 12 to 24 empty plastic queen cups is added to the top of the brood box to allow the bees to polish the cell cups and add a small rim of beeswax to each one. This also ensures that the cups are warm to brood nest temperature. A comb of pollen is put in the top box next to the graft bar, and a comb of young larvae, preferably also with some pollen stores on, is also placed on the other side of the graft bar. This young brood attracts nurse bees to the graft area. If there is not a reliable nectar flow occurring naturally, one is simulated by feeding 50% sugar syrup in a frame feeder. Before we proceed, I just want to go over how we rearrange the parent colony again. The queen is in the bottom brood box with 2 or 3 frames of young brood, unsealed larvae, in the centre of the box. These frames are flanked on both sides by a frame of empty comb which will give the queen somewhere to lay in. The 2 outside frames at either end of the box are stores. A queen excluder is placed on the box and then the second brood box on top is rearranged as so. A frame feeder, then a frame of stores, a frame of pollen, then the graft frame, next to the graft frame a frame of young bees, young brood, unsealed larvae, and the rest of the box is made up with frames of sealed and merging brood. So here's the timetable of actions. On day -1 at 5 PM we rearrange the rearer colony as shown previously, and we return the next afternoon about lunchtime and we graft selected larvae from the breeder colony into the graft frame. Grafting is frightening to many beekeepers and it can be quite fiddly, but as with most things in beekeeping as well, you get better with practice, so don't be put off. Grafting is either done with a flexible spatula-like tool such as a Chinese grafting tool or a solid metal tool such as a dentist's excavator. The Chinese grafting tool has the advantage of transferring a bed of royal jelly along with the larvae, but good acceptance rates have been obtained when dry grafting with a metal tool, or a fine wetted toothbrush can be used. Each larva is picked up by approaching from the outer convex curve of its C shape. As I said, it comes with practice and you would probably benefit from attending a course to learn how to do it. The completed grafts now in the graft frame are returned to the rearer colony as soon as possible. 2 days after grafting, the graft frame is checked to assess cell acceptance. As you can see in this instance, 16 out of 24 cells have been accepted, which isn't bad, comes in at 66%. You can see that the bees have extended the cups downwards and the larvae are now being fed royal jelly. Sometimes the bees rear emergency queen cells on the brood frames in the upper brood box. So 6 or 7 days after grafting, all combs of brood in the top box are shaken free of bees and any such queen cells are destroyed. It is important, obviously, that the graft cells are removed from the rearer colony before the queens emerge. So, the non-mature queen cells are removed 11 days after grafting, which is about 1 day before the queens are due to emerge. They are put into the Apideas, entrances closed, stocked with about 300 bees and some fondant as food. The Apideas are placed inside, somewhere cool, for 3 days. Over the next 24 hours, the virgin queens will emerge, and if you come back the next day, you will likely hear a veritable orchestra of queens quawking and piping. It is quite special to hear this, I can tell you, and I must admit that this hardened bee farmer was in tears the first time I heard it. The bees will settle down, and with a new queen present, they will become a small, cohesive colony. On day 15 in the evening, they are placed on their site in the apiary and the entrances are opened. We then leave them alone for 3 weeks, after which we check for eggs. So in these photographs you can see me distributing sealed queen cells for insertion into the Apideas. The queen cell is placed like this between 2 of the frames, secured using the sides of the plastic cup, as you can see here. You want to stock the Apideas with young house bees, and bees from supers will do fine for this. As long as you had a queen excluder between the brood box and supers, you can shake the bees off the super phrase into an upturned roof or nuc box, safe in the knowledge that the queen is still in the brood box. Before shaking the frame, spray the bees with water and spray them again once shaken into the roof, as this prevents them from flying off and they'll settle nicely in the box. Spraying the bees with water so that they are actually soaked is important. They look a sorry soggy mess, but they will soon dry off when they are put into the Apidea and will be grateful of the additional moisture they have inside. The wet bees are easy to scoop up into a 1-pound honey jar. We want it about 2/3 full, and they are then poured into the upside down Apideas, which has the sealed queen cell and fondant already in place, via the sliding floor, which is then closed. So here you can see the upside down Apidea with the sliding floor open. Once the bees are poured inside, slide the floor closed and the bees are trapped inside. Remember, the entrance is also closed. Like so. Just to go over what you do with the Apideas once they are stocked with bees and a mature queen cell. Place it in a dark, cool room for 2 or 3 days. Then locate it outside in the evening and open the entrance. Virgin queens will fly from the mini nucs, mate and normally start laying quickly within 2 or 3 weeks. When the queen has laid up 2 frames and you see sealed worker brood, she should be removed as soon as possible and used wherever needed. If there is any delay, make sure the queen excluder is slid over the entrance to prevent her absconding. The bees will roar when placed inside, but once the queens have emerged they will quieten down. If it's particularly warm, you can mist water with a sprayer through the ventilation grill like this. If raising a lot of queens, you will need lots of mating apiaries, and here's some of mine. This one has nucs made up of corax boxes plus a few Apideas, again from a different angle. Here's another mating apiary. You can see a mix of corax nucs, homemade wooden nucs and some Apideas. And again, interestingly, you will find that some sites work better as mating apiaries than others, but you will only find out the best ones by trial and error. Here you can see that the queen has emerged successfully from this queen cell, evidenced by the queen cell lid having opened. The same with these 3. Cell lids have opened, queens have emerged. In the week after the Apideas are located in the mating apiary, you may witness a few dozen bees like this fanning at the entrance, and this is quite likely to be a queen out on a mating flight, and the bees are releasing national pheromone to call her home. These very small colonies act just the same as full-size hives, only in miniature. They will draw out comb and store nectar and pollen. The brood pattern will be similar, with the brood in the center of the tiny frames and the pollen and honey in the arch around the brood. As this is sealed worker brood, you know the queen is not a drone layer, so she is ready to be removed. Here you can see the entrance with the excluder over it to stop the nucleus absconding after the queen has started laying. What about problems with mini nucs? Well, some colleagues report problems with badges, but I have never had any issues. If you do have a problem, evidenced by the Apideas being strewn around the apiary, then mount them at least 3 foot high like this in the photograph. Robbing by bees and wasps can also be a big problem, so I wouldn't locate them in a direct flight path of a full-size colony. If you see robbing, then I would close the entrance and relocate to another apiary as soon as possible. Wind can be a problem, and if there is no wind shelter, place bricks on top to prevent them blowing away. I have already mentioned absconding, so insert the queen excluder into the entrance as soon as the queen is laying. And the last one is starvation, which can be an issue, so check their stores every 7 days and replenish if necessary. What else can go wrong? Well, sometimes the queen returns to the wrong Apidea, and you end up with all the bees from neighbouring Apideas in the one with the returning queen in. So always place them with entrances facing different directions, but sometimes even that doesn't prevent what you can see here. These are torn down queen cells. In my experience using Apideas, it is unusual for the bees to tear down the queen cells, but they do, usually when you are introducing a queen cell to an Apidea from which you have just removed the mated queen from. And there are eggs and larvae present, so they can raise their own queen. You can use a queen cell protector like the one in the photograph on the right, or here, or wrap the queen cell in sellotape or foil, making sure the tip of the queen cell is not covered, as this is where the queen will emerge from. Sometimes you find this. The queen has emerged, as evidenced by the queen cell lid being open, but the bees have absconded. This can happen if she didn't make it back from a mating flight, as there is nothing to keep the bees in the Apidea if that happens. If she doesn't mate within 4 weeks, then she is likely to become a drone layer. The lack of sperm means that all her eggs are unfertilized, and the emerging bees will therefore all be drones, mini drones, as she will have laid in worker-sized cells. Just like that. If the queen has been lost on a mating flight and the bees remain in the Apidea, you are also likely to see laying workers. Laying workers lay unfertilized eggs, and you can know the difference between them and a drone laying queen in that laying workers usually lay multiple eggs in one cell, sometimes up to 10, and they are often on the walls of the cell, not the base, with the queen usually lays one single egg in the base of the cell. You can unite an Apidea with a mated queen using the newspaper method like this. Simply remove the old queen from the big hive, remove the floor from the Apidea and place it over newspaper like so. They will unite peacefully, and the next day this is what you should see. You need to make sure the queen goes into the brood chamber of the big hive now, and then add a queen excluder between the brood chamber and the Apidea, preventing the queen re-laying eggs in it. After 24 days, the Apidea can be removed and any bees shaken back into the full-size hive. If you have several Apideas at the end of the season, you can unite them to a full-size hive like this. Make sure there are no queen cells in the Apideas and that a queen excluder is between the full-size hive and the Apideas, plus a sheet of newspaper. These are top bars of frames used to subdivide the Apidea frames. When all the brooders emerge, shake the bees back into the hive and store the Apideas in frames for use next season. I will be making a video on queen introduction and handling, so this is just a quick summary for you. You should be able to pick up a queen by her wings, but if you can't, then you can use a plunger cage like this one, and once the sponge plunger has immobilized the queen, you can mark her with a marking pen on her thorax, and if she sticks her wing out, which she often does, you can also clip one side only of one of her big wings. Practical beekeepers should be able to pick up queens, especially if you're doing any queen rearing, but you also need to be able to do so if taking the general or advanced husbandry assessment in England or the intermediate or advanced practical assessment in Scotland. I would encourage you to get on a course, as being shown how to do it is better than using photos, but I'll do my best. If you are right-handed, use your right hand to pick up the queen. Approach her from behind and immobilize her on the comb by gently pressing her thorax into the comb. Never press her abdomen. Clasp both of her large wings with your thumb and first finger and lift her off the frame. With practice, you won't have to immobilize her on the comb, and you will be able to grasp her wings and lift her from the frame in one movement. Obviously, if you're left-handed, you use the left hand for this purpose. You now need to transfer her to the tip of the first finger on your left hand. Put her legs towards this finger and she will grasp it. As she does this, use your thumb to trap her legs between the first finger and thumb. It is important to grasp at least two legs, as if you grasp just one, she is likely to spin around until eventually her leg breaks off. So, if you only get one leg, release the leg and try again. An alternative method is to hold the queen by her thorax between the thumb, first finger and second finger of the left hand, if right-handed. Make sure her antennae are free. Be firm but gentle with the queen, as they are tougher than they look. The most popular marking pens are the Posca paint pens shown in the top photograph, but they sometimes release too much paint, so be careful or you can drown the queen. I've done that. I prefer to use Humbrol enamel paint shown in the bottom right, which you can apply to the queen's thorax with a matchstick, and this doesn't run everywhere. So when using the Posca pens, test the pen first by pressing the nib on your finger, and you'll see if you have a leaky pen. When marking a queen, you put a dot of paint on her thorax, making sure you get the paint past the hairs. Don't use too much paint and allow it to dry before releasing the queen. I've covered queen clipping in detail in my videos on swarming, so check them out for more information if you're interested. But briefly, a clipped queen will still leave the hive with the swarm, but as she can't fly, the bees return to the hive and the queen is usually lost. The colony can't successfully swarm now until the first virgin queen emerges, which will be about 7 or 8 days later. So clipping the queen wings just allows you a longer time interval, 14 days between colony inspections during the swarming season. This is useful for bee farmers who may have hundreds of hives to look at. Remember this point though, clipping one of the big wings of a queen on one side only won't stop your bees from swarming, and I wouldn't recommend it, unless you are very experienced and you have many hives. You clip 1/3 of one side of a forewing, which is a big one. Bring scissors in from the side and carefully do this so you don't stab the queen. Get the scissors in place and then pause before cutting, as often the queen will raise a leg at this point and you don't want to snip it off. I've done that too a few times. When she puts the leg down, cut the wings so that it is completely removed and the job is done. Just a quick point on releasing the queen back into the hive or onto a frame. Don't drop her onto the frame, as I have seen the bees react violently to a queen drop like this, and I've had to rescue a few queens that have been immediately bored by the bees. If she's in a cage, open it and place the cage on the top bars and let the queen leave on her own. If you have hold of her, gently release her onto the frame or top bars by simply releasing her legs and let her walk off calmly. Doing it this way is far safer than dropping her onto the comb. You also need to be able to pick up worker bees and put it in the cage with the queen. Here's how you do it. If you're right-handed, hold the queen cage in your left hand with the lid open as shown in the top photograph. This is the bee space through which you are going to put the queen and worker bees. Cover the gap with your thumb, and then by rolling your thumb up and down you can expose the entrance briefly to either expose or cover the gap. So the queen is picked up as shown previously and she is placed into the cage first. Make sure you roll your thumb down so she can't escape, and make sure that the other end of the cage has folded in the feed chamber. Please take my word for it on this next stage. Picking up worker bees is easier than you think. You just need to get over the fear that you will be stung, which is very rare. You now need to choose 5 stationary workers from the comb. The frame can be lying on the top bars of the brood box, so there will be plenty of worker bees to select from. Choose a stationary bee. One with their head in a cell. Having a feed is easier. Unlike with the queen, when we have to immobilize her first, with workers we simply use the thumb and first finger to grab both wings at the same time and lift air off the frame. You will have better success with bare hands or very tight latex gloves. If you have a good grip on both wings, she won't be able to move, and as she is facing the wrong way, she won't be able to sting you. In fact, you could hold her for as long as you wanted to, and there should be no need for panic. But the object of the exercise is to get the workers into the cage with the queen. So, smoothly and firmly, you need to roll your thumb up and place the worker bee into the gap in the cage, making sure you put her bottom in first, and then quickly roll your thumb back down to prevent any escapes. And you now need to do that again with 4 or 5 more worker bees, trying your best not to let any bees escape. I've taught hundreds of students to do this, and they have all surprised themselves by having a go, some with more success than others. I've caged hundreds and hundreds of worker bees in this way, and I can say I have never been stung once, so give it a go and you will, I'm sure, surprise yourself. As well as being quite lucrative, you will get a lot of satisfaction when you have the end results. Each queen cage here has a mated queen in, folded in the food chamber, and 6 or 7 worker bees to look after the queen whilst they are in transit via Royal Mail to all corners of Scotland. So that is the end of session 5, and indeed the end of the series on queen rearing and selection. Today I have covered the use of Apideas mini mating hives, as well as the system of rearing queens in a Queenright colony, along with some tips on handling queens. If you email or message me, see the YouTube for email address. I will send you a handout on the system of queen rearing in a Queenright colony so you can have a go yourself. I hope this series has encouraged you to have a go at queen rearing in the future, and I would be delighted to hear from you to see how you get on. If you are enjoying these videos, you can buy me a beer or make a donation to my PayPal account by following the links in the page banner. Thank you to those who have already bought me a beer. Your donation will help with the running cost. That's all for now. Adios amigos.